Two men, two of the most unforgiving places on earth. One swallowed alive by the Sahara Desert, forced to drink his own urine and live on bat blood for 9 days. The other left for dead on Mt Everest at 28,000 feet, only to open his eyes the next morning and calmly tell his rescuers he was still alive. These are not Hollywood stories. These are the raw and true accounts of Mauro Prosperi and Lincoln Hall, two ordinary men who looked death in the face and refused to blink. What you're about to hear will stay with you. But first, if you enjoy my editing and the stories I tell, and you want to see more, do me a big favor and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Alright, let's begin. The wind screamed across the Sahara like something alive and furious, a wall of sand that could erase a man in seconds. It was April 1994, deep in the Moroccan desert, and the Marathon des Sables was underway. 250 brutal kilometers of nothing but dunes and sun that most people would never dream of attempting. Mauro Prosperi was 39, a former Olympic pentathlete and a police officer back in Italy, built for this kind of punishment. He was running strong on day 4, deep into the longest stage, when the storm exploded out of nowhere. One moment the sky was a merciless blue, the next, everything turned yellow and violent. Sand tore at his face, blinding him, choking the air from his lungs. The dunes themselves began to shift and move, wiping away every single landmark. His compass was useless. The race organizers had stopped the stage because of the weather, but Mauro, he never heard that call. He was already gone, blown completely off course. Hours turned into days. His water ran out. He measured every single remaining drop like it was gold. Then he did what he had to do when even that was gone. He drank his own urine over and over and over, just to keep his blood from turning to sludge. The heat baked him alive. Hallucinations danced at the edges of his vision, but still he kept walking. On the third day alone, he found it. An abandoned marabout, an old stone shrine built centuries ago for a holy man. Inside lay a single coffin. No water, no food, just 4 walls and a roof against the furnace outside. Mauro collapsed there and turned it into his last shelter. He burned the few scraps of fuel he carried and cooked what little he had left, using his own urine as the only liquid. Bats clung to the ceiling above him in the dark, and hunger eventually drove him up with his pocket knife. He took them one by one, slicing their heads off, drinking the warm blood straight from their bodies, eating the raw flesh. More than 20 of them before the worst of the hunger loosened its grip. Lizards and beetles, anything that moved and breathed. He tried to signal for help. He lit fires when planes passed overhead. He scratched SOS messages into the sand with his hands. But every time, another storm rolled in and wiped his work away like it had never existed. 9 full days passed. He had wandered nearly 200 miles off course, crossing an international border into Algeria. His body had lost 16 kilograms, and such he was a skeleton wrapped in burned skin. That final night in the shrine, the weight of it all finally broke him. He took a piece of charcoal and scratched a goodbye to his wife on the stone wall. Words of love and of farewell. Then he drew the knife across his wrists and laid down to die. But the desert still was not finished with him. His blood had grown so thick from dehydration that it barely flowed. The cuts clotted almost immediately, and he woke the next morning still breathing, still trapped, still alive. Something inside him refused to let go, and he staggered out one last time. A few hours later, he heard voices, real human voices, carrying across the sand. He had reached the remote Berber settlement. Algerian soldiers found him standing there, a ghost who had walked out of the grave. 9.5 days lost in the Sahara. They carried him out on a stretcher, staring in disbelief at the man who had survived on bat blood, his own urine, and nothing else. Mauro Prosperi eventually made it home, recovered, and, years later, returned to finish the very race the desert had tried to steal from him. Now, try to picture something completely different. It's May 25, 2006. 29,000 feet above sea level on Mt Everest in the so-called death zone, where the air is so thin the human body begins to die the moment it arrives. Lincoln Hall, 50 years old, an experienced Australian mountaineer on his second attempt at the summit, stood on top of the world that morning. The view stretched out forever. The team took their photos, shared a brief moment of triumph, and began the long descent. But, barely an hour later, near the second step at 28,500 feet, the mountain showed its true face. Lincoln's steps turned unsteady, his speech slurred, his altitude cerebral edema had set in. His brain was swelling inside his skull from a lack of oxygen. He collapsed on a narrow ridge with a 10,000-foot drop straight down the Kangshung face on one side. Their oxygen ran out, and then his 3 Sherpa companions fought for 17 straight hours to save him. They even tried to radio base camp. They tried everything that they knew. And then night fell. The temperature plunged far below zero, and their oxygen ran out. They couldn't see through the snow. The choice they faced was brutal: stay with him and die themselves, or leave and live. They left him there, stripping some of his outer layers so the cold would finish its work more quickly. Word went out to the world: Lincoln Hall was dead. His family in Australia received the news and began to mourn. But Lincoln was not dead. All through that frozen night he sat alone on that ridge, exposed to the wind, without oxygen, without shelter, without any hope at all. Hypothermia should have stopped his heart. Frostbite should have taken his hands and feet. The thin air should have shut his brain down completely, and yet somehow he endured. Dawn broke on May 26. Another climbing team was moving forward. American guide Dan Mazur and his clients. They came around a corner and stopped cold. A man was sitting cross-legged in the snow, no gloves, no hat, down suit half unzipped, chest bare to the killing wind. At first they thought it was a body, but then the man lifted his head. In a calm, almost detached voice, Lincoln Hall looked straight at them and said, "I imagine you're surprised to see me here." The team abandoned their own summit attempt on the spot. They gave him their oxygen, wrapped him in their own clothing, and fed him what they had. Rescue teams raced up from below. Sherpas climbed back into the death zone again and again. Inch by agonizing inch, they brought Lincoln down the mountain. He was frostbitten and delirious, but he was alive. The man the mountain had already declared dead had survived a night that should have been impossible. He eventually walked off Everest under his own power. Doctors would study his case for years and still shake their heads at what the human body can endure when everything else has been stripped away. 2 men, 2 of the harshest places on earth. One swallowed by fire and endless sand, the other abandoned to ice and air so thin it kills. Both pushed far beyond any limit science says a person should be able to survive. Both stared straight into the end and chose to keep going anyway. That is the story of Mauro Prosperi and Lincoln Hall. Not just survival, something deeper. A reminder that inside the human spirit there is a force stronger than heat, stronger than cold, and stronger than despair itself. A force that, when everything else is gone, still decides to stand.
The wind it spoke in broken sighs through hollow reeds.